Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are diving into Pegasus Spyware and the NSO Group today.
All right.
We've got a scientific analysis. It really digs into the whole story of this spyware,
Oh, wow.
like where it came from, what it can actually do,
Yeah.
which is pretty wild.
I bet.
The ripple effect it's had around the world, all the debate around it.
I'm ready.
Our mission, as always, is to pull out the really crucial, mind-blowing stuff about Pegasus.
Okay.
So you get why it's such a big deal without needing a PhD in cybersecurity.
Right.
You know.
Makes sense.
So yeah, expect some surprises along the way and some satisfying aha moments
Nice.
as we unpack this,
Cool.
So
Well, this is a fascinating and unsettling analysis that we've got here.
Yeah.
It really meticulously traces this journey of the NSO Group from its very beginning to its current status as a highly scrutinized entity.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at the innovative technology that they developed, the significant ethical challenges it presents, and the wide-ranging consequences that have followed from its use.
Exactly.
It's a real case study in the power and peril of modern surveillance capability.
That's it. All right, let's go right to the source. NSO Group appeared in 2010 in Israel, founded by Niv Karmi, Omri Lavi, and Shalev Julio.
Okay.
And here's a detail I found really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The name NSO isn't like some complex tech acronym.
Okay.
Right? It's literally just their initials.
Wow. Okay.
But what's really significant here is where these guys came from.
Okay.
All three of them were previously part of Unit 8200, which is essentially the cyber warfare division of Israeli intelligence.
Wow. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting when you think about how that direct experience within, really advanced military intelligence unit
Likely shaped
their whole
approach to
technology development.
Yeah. Unit 8200 is really known for its offensive cyber capabilities.
Right.
So to have the founders with that background, I mean,
it's huge.
That gave NSO Group such an advantage when it came to creating sophisticated spyware.
Yeah.
Because they weren't just building software.
Right.
They were applying nation-state level expertise to a commercial product.
It's like taking Formula One engineers.
Right.
And asking them to build, like a regular car.
Yeah.
You'd expect something.
High performance.
Really high performance, right?
Yeah, sure.
And it gets even more interesting when you see what Julio and Lavi did before Pegasus.
Okay, yeah.
They actually co-founded this company called Communitake, which offered remote maintenance for mobile phones.
Okay.
But here's the kicker.
Yeah?
Only with the user's permission.
Oh, wow.
That's quite a jump, right? That's a huge jump.
From getting consent to access a phone to creating a tool that can silently break into it.
Yeah, that contrast really underscores a fundamental shift in their objective.
Yeah.
Like their earlier work demonstrated they knew about remote mobile access.
Right.
But this move toward Pegasus, I think it indicates a very deliberate pivot towards exploiting vulnerabilities for non-consensual surveillance.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, and I think their intelligence background combined with their prior experience,
of course,
likely gave them a unique insight into the weaknesses of mobile operating systems and how to access them surreptitiously.
Yeah.
So it suggests a conscious decision to develop tools for covert surveillance.
Right.
Rather than like user-authorized assistance.
Exactly. So they sort of identified this demand.
Right.
Or maybe like a gap, for technology that could bypass security measures for the benefit of security and intelligence agencies.
Right. Yeah.
And they move fast.
Okay.
They got initial investment from a group led by Eddie Shalev of Genesis Partners.
Okay.
And by 2012, just 2 years after forming, they landed a huge $20 million contract with the Mexican federal government.
That's pretty remarkable.
That shows you how quickly they scaled up.
What's really remarkable is not just the speed at which they secured such a substantial deal, but what it tells us about the perceived need for this type of technology.
Yeah.
For a government to invest $20 million
it's massive
in a relatively new company.
Yeah.
Suggests their product already offered something significant and it's even more telling that the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration
DEA
was also offered their services, yeah.
Wow.
Although ultimately they declined because of the cost. But that just highlights the early recognition of Pegasus's potential reach and its impact on law enforcement, even globally.
So 20 million back then, that was it. That was a huge statement.
It was.
And speaking of big numbers, 2014 saw a major financial event.
Okay.
The founders sold a majority stake, 70%, to the U.S. private equity firm Francisco Partners.
Okay.
For $130 million, valuing the whole company at $180 million.
Wow.
Founders kept a 15% share each.
Okay.
That is serious money flowing into this kind of technology.
Well, yeah, and if we look at it more broadly, I think the involvement of a U.S.-based private equity firm like Francisco Partners underscores the significant commercial interest in the cyber surveillance industry.
For sure.
And this acquisition also happened at the same time as Francisco Partners acquired another surveillance company called Circles.
Okay.
Which then became affiliated with NSO Group.
Yeah.
So you can see how they were trying to create a more comprehensive suite of surveillance tools and expand their reach.
Exactly.
The fact that the founders retained a significant stake suggests they still really believed in the growth potential of the company and wanted to remain involved. So this wasn't just like a simple sale.
No.
It was a strategic move within a rapidly expanding industry.
And it did expand.
Yeah.
By 2017, just a few years later, NSO Group had grown to almost 500 employees.
Okay.
And their revenue in 2015 hit $150 million.
That's wild.
That's exponential growth in a really short amount of time.
That rapid growth really shows how much demand there was for their services. I mean, it suggests that government agencies really sought after these advanced surveillance capabilities.
Totally.
And that kind of expansion also means they had to invest heavily in research and development to stay ahead of the curve. Yeah. You know, it was like a technological arms race.
It's crazy how fast it happened.
Yeah.
Now, let's circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The founders' roots in military intelligence.
Right.
The analysis really emphasizes how important this is. You know? It wasn't just about having technical skills. It likely meant that they had these deep connections within the Israeli defense establishment.
Right.
And here's a crucial point that came up.
Okay.
Israel classifies Pegasus as a weapon.
Oh, wow.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
It is a huge deal. Yeah. What does that tell you?
Well, it means the Israeli government maintains a level of oversight and control over its sale and export.
Right.
These transactions aren't treated like regular commercial software deals.
Yeah.
They require government approval.
Exactly.
Implying that they are intended primarily for government clients, for national security purposes.
Yeah, this is not.
And it also raises questions about the extent to which the Israeli government might be aware of or even influence the deployment of Pegasus by its customers.
It's not just a piece of software.
No, it's not just a piece of software.
It's a tool with national security implications, according to its country of origin.
Exactly.
Okay, so the early days were about rapid growth.
Right.
You know, establishing themselves as a major player. But things took a sharp turn towards controversy.
Yeah.
Let's move into the evolution and the growing list of issues, really, surrounding NSO Group and Pegasus.
Right.
The turning point seems to have been around 2016.
Okay.
When Pegasus really entered the public consciousness.
Right.
After being used to target a human rights activist in the UAE.
That incident in 2016 was definitely a pivotal moment.
Totally.
It shifted the perception of Pegasus from this, shadowy tool used by intelligence agencies to a tangible threat to individuals and civil society.
For sure.
And it was one of the first, really publicized cases that demonstrated how it could be misused against people simply exercising their basic rights.
It's a big shift.
Not just those suspected of serious crimes.
Yeah.
This really marked the beginning of the intense scrutiny that NSO Group has been under.
Yeah. And the ownership story continued its twists and turns.
Okay.
In February 2019, the founders, Julio and Lavi, they bought back a majority stake.
Okay.
60%.
Okay.
This time they were backed by a European private equity firm called Novelpina Capital.
Okay.
Valuing the company at around $1 billion.
Wow.
That's another big jump in valuation.
Yeah.
But as we know now, the Novelpina chapter didn't go very smoothly.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the continued involvement of private equity, even amidst the ethical concerns,
Totally.
shows just how much value NSO Group's technology had.
Yeah.
You know, from a financial perspective.
Yeah.
That $1 billion valuation really underscores just how lucrative the cyber surveillance market is.
No. Yeah.
But then the liquidation of Novelpina Capital, due to internal disputes, introduced a lot of instability and uncertainty regarding the company's future ownership.
Right. Who's in control of this?
And the implications of that control.
Exactly. And then came what a lot of people see as the real watershed moment.
Okay.
The Pegasus project in 2021.
Right.
This huge journalistic investigation.
Yeah.
Revealed widespread abuse of Pegasus.
Right.
Against a really concerning range of people.
Yeah.
I mean, journalists, activists, politicians, you name it.
The Pegasus project was a turning point for sure. I mean, the sheer scale of the alleged targeting, which was revealed through this leaked list,
of 50,000 phone numbers.
It's incredible.
Brought the issue of spyware misuse to the forefront of global public debate.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that so many international media organizations collaborated on this really lent weight and credibility to these findings.
Oh, yeah.
It really amplified the calls for accountability and regulation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it moved the conversations from being about isolated incidents to this really systemic problem.
Totally.
With potentially far-reaching implications.
It's huge.
For democracy and human rights.
It's huge. And the reactions were pretty strong.
Yeah.
And they came from all over the place.
Yeah.
In November 2021, the U.S. Department of Commerce, they took a really significant step, adding NSO Group to its entity list.
Oh, wow.
That was a major blow.
Yeah.
Essentially banning U.S. companies from doing business with them, citing concerns about national security.
And foreign policy interests.
Right. I mean, the U.S. blacklisting was a very clear signal of the U.S. government's stance against the proliferation and misuse of commercial spyware.
Yeah, yeah.
It not only restricted NSO Group's access to critical U.S. technologies and services, but also sent a very strong message to the international community about how seriously they took this issue.
Yeah.
This action had significant financial and reputational repercussions.
Of course, yeah.
For NSO Group.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it impacted their ability to operate and secure future business.
Yeah. And it wasn't just governments taking action.
Right.
Major tech companies like Apple and WhatsApp, which is owned by Meta now, also got involved.
Right.
They stepped into the legal arena, launching lawsuits against NSO Group, alleging the hacking of their users.
Yeah.
WhatsApp's suit came in 2019.
Okay.
Apple followed in 2021.
Right. And these legal challenges from these major technology platforms are a significant pushback against the exploitation of their systems for these surveillance purposes.
Exactly.
They really highlight the potential legal liabilities that spyware vendors and their clients face for unauthorized access and data breaches.
Right, yeah.
And the involvement of tech giants like Apple and Meta means they have a lot of legal and financial resources
That's a deal
that they can put towards this issue.
Yeah.
Potentially setting some important precedents for the future regulation of spyware.
Huge, huge. All of this controversy and legal pressure and being blacklisted, it took a toll on NSO Group.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
They reportedly faced some financial difficulties.
Right.
Went through some internal reorganizations.
Right.
And then in May 2023, there was another ownership shift.
Okay.
This time to a Luxembourg-based entity called Dufresne Holdings, which is controlled by co-founder Omri Lavi.
Okay.
So in a way, it's kind of come full circle.
Right. This latest ownership transfer under Omri Lavi seems like an attempt to try and regain stability.
Okay.
You know, and navigate the complex challenges the company's facing.
Yeah.
However, the underlying issues of misuse and all this regulatory scrutiny remain significant hurdles.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've continued to lobby to be taken off the U.S. entity list
Right.
shows that they want to get back into that U.S. market.
Yeah,
They maybe rehabilitate their public image.
Yeah.
But it remains to be seen whether that will be successful.
It's a long road.
Yeah.
So the story of the NSO Group is a real roller coaster ride.
It is.
Going from this relatively unknown startup to a globally recognized and highly controversial name.
Yes.
All because of the increasing understanding of Pegasus's power and how it's being used.
Right.
All right. Let's switch gears a bit now.
Okay.
Let's dive into the core of the issue here.
All right.
The technical capabilities of Pegasus.
Okay.
We've mentioned this zero-click exploit.
Yes.
But for our listeners who might not be, tech experts, can you really break down what that means and why it's such a game changer?
Absolutely. The defining characteristic of Pegasus is its ability to be installed on a target's smartphone remotely without the user having to do anything.
That's scary.
That's zero-click.
Yeah.
And it does this by exploiting security vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Think of them as weaknesses or flaws in the phone's operating system.
Or
so whether it's Apple's iOS or Google's Android, it can essentially sneak into the phone through these flaws without the user clicking on a link, opening a file, doing anything.
So they don't know.
It's completely silent and invisible to the target.
That's pretty stealthy.
It is.
So how does it actually happen?
Okay.
What apps are we talking about?
Well, the analysis highlights several commonly targeted apps, especially the ones that handle incoming data and media. So like iMessage, WhatsApp, Apple Music, Photos.
Wow.
Even the Find My app.
Really?
Yeah, these apps are often processing information automatically.
Right.
And vulnerabilities and how they handle that data can be exploited to inject the spyware.
Okay.
There are specific exploit names, like Forced Entry, which targeted iMessage.
Wow.
But there's also Find MYPWN, PWNY Your Home, and BlastPass.
It's crazy.
All of these are methods that Pegasus uses to gain access.
So it's like you built this fortress, and then you find out the enemy has this secret tunnel.
Yeah, totally.
That goes right under the wall.
It's a huge step up from the older methods.
Like, I remember hearing about spyware being spread through, like, suspicious links in emails.
Right, exactly.
Or text messages,
Those older methods are called one-click exploits.
Right, yeah.
And they rely on what we call social engineering.
Right.
Basically, tricking the target into clicking on a malicious link.
Right, right.
Often sent through targeted messages known as spear phishing via SMS, email, or social media.
Yeah.
And these messages are designed to look really legitimate or enticing to get the person to click.
Yeah.
But the shift towards zero-click exploits shows a significant evolution in spyware technology.
It's much more powerful.
Yeah, because no user interaction is needed.
Right.
Infection is much more covert and successful.
Totally.
It's much harder for people to protect themselves because there are no telltale signs, like a suspicious link to avoid.
Exactly. So if zero-click is the main method now, are those other infection techniques?
Yeah.
Like the network-based attacks or even physical access to the phone?
Right.
Are those still relevant?
Well, the analysis suggests that while zero-click exploits are the most common and sophisticated method, other techniques still exist, but they're less common. So network-based attacks, where a user might be unknowingly redirected to a website that silently installs the spyware over an insecure internet connection. Those are still possible. In very targeted cases, physical access to a device could be used for installation. But that's obviously a lot riskier and less scalable than the zero-click remote infection. The focus on zero-click shows how the spyware industry is constantly trying to achieve maximum stealth and reliability.
So they don't have to rely on the target.
Exactly.
Making a mistake.
They want to eliminate any reliance on the target.
Yeah, it's really scary for anybody concerned about their digital security.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pegasus gets in.
Yeah.
Without you even having to touch your phone.
Right.
What happens next?
Okay.
How does it actually go about collecting your data?
So once Pegasus gets onto a device, its capabilities for data collection are incredibly comprehensive.
It's scary how...
It can essentially access almost all the information stored and transmitted by the phone.
Everything.
So we're talking about reading text messages and emails, listening in on phone calls, stealing passwords, tracking the device's location, activating the microphone and camera, and extracting data from virtually any app.
So private conversations, personal photos.
Yes.
Financial details.
Yes.
Absolutely everything.
Yes. The analysis details that Pegasus can access SMS messages, emails, photos, contacts, calendar entries, GPS data, call logs.
Yeah.
Even your browsing history.
That's scary.
But the really invasive part is its ability to get into encrypted data and messages.
Right.
And it does that by intercepting the data before it's encrypted.
Wow.
By messaging apps.
Yeah.
Or after it's been decrypted on the user's device.
Wow. So it's basically like someone's reading your mail after it's been delivered.
Exactly.
And opened inside your house.
It completely undermines the whole idea of secure communication in the digital age.
How does it manage to bypass all the security features built into modern operating systems?
Well, Pegasus uses techniques called jailbreaking on iPhones and rooting on Android phones. And these processes essentially remove the software restrictions imposed by the operating system, giving Pegasus what we call administrator-level privileges. So complete control over the device's functions.
So you basically have no control over your own phone at that point.
And it can also copy what are called authentication tokens. These are like digital keys that keep you logged into online services. Like Google Drive and iCloud without having to put in your password each time. So by stealing these,